Chapter 26. They marched single file into the auditorium they called the People's Hall. Grim-faced, robust men, most of them in their 30s and 40s, seating themselves in metal chairs laid out in several rows. They dressed in similar green and gray militia garb and showed a steely-eyed single-mindedness, a full-fledged redneck turnout. Some of them brought their women along, who dressed in similar gear. I strode in wearing name-brand jeans and a polo shirt and took a seat among the audience. A few of them eyed me with suspicion. I smiled back, pretending to be an admirer of the colonel, and eager to hear his call to action. The colonel had important announcements to make from what I'd gathered listening to the surrounding chatter. The audience's excitement was palpable and filled the air with expectation. Most political parties start out small and disappear or get relegated to the fringe. The colonel's organization looked to have the potential to grow into a real movement. The nation's perception of Washington as a hub of corrupt politicians and lobbyists, along with the bailouts of bankers and a ruinous economic recession, threatened to upend the status quo. The times were ripe for a new political party. We waited 20 minutes before the colonel stepped out from behind a curtain. He strolled up to a wooden podium, dressed this time in the full regalia of a 5-star general's uniform. His own rank didn't rise to the occasion. An impressive hat and a slew of medals pinned to his chest gave him an aura of supreme authority. His frame stayed hidden behind the podium, putting focus on the colonel's broad shoulders and granite-like features underneath his star-studded cap. It was an imposing sight and choreographed for full effect. A small microphone and a glass of water sat on the podium. The grade of the hall sloped down toward the proscenium and made viewing easily accessible for the entire room. The stage was bare, with only a maroon-colored curtain hanging from the rafters and postcard-sized American flags draped over a wire that stretched across the stage. A hush fell over the room as Rippendorf prepared to speak. "My fellow soldiers, all the men and women of the Bring Back Our Nation movement, and those of you considering joining the fold, I bid you a fond welcome to our glorious compound here in the Sonoran Desert." The audience broke into applause. "I know many of you have come from other states and traveled far and wide to our desert location because you believe in our cause and wish to take part in the important meetings we are holding throughout the week. I hope the accommodations and hospitality have been to your liking." The crowd applauded again, showing their approval. "Good. I've tried to make every minute of your stay as pleasurable and inspiring as possible. It reflects the philosophy we adhere to and sometimes get preachy about, I'll admit." Laughter broke out in the room, and the colonel joined in with a big, flashy smile. He performed like a politician, charming his audience with humor and affability. I watched a different person on stage. He kept his surly manner and bullying tone in check. Rippendorf knew how to work a crowd, and had the potential to run for elective office, sending shivers down my spine. The militiamen seated around me looked impatient, waiting for the political red meat the colonel would no doubt deliver. "We, in the Bring Back Our Nation movement, believe only those citizens born into a nation as robust and mighty as ours should be given every amenity and convenience our country has to offer. It is our right, the blood right of people who built this great nation and who fought and died to make it the most powerful on earth, to garner the fruits of our struggle as conquering armies have done throughout history." Some in the crowd whooped and hollered, and others rang out with rebel cheers. The colonel waited for the ruckus to settle down and took on a grim tone. "Folks, we are at the mercy of a new world order that's crushing us, ripping apart our identity, and turning our people into vassals of a new global hierarchy. We're surrounded by enemies both within and outside our borders, and faced with mass movements of people from foreign shores, from cultures who come to live in Western man's ancestral homes by legal and illegal means. Our political leaders have betrayed us. Their policies now threaten the survival of our race and the entire Western world." He stopped to sip water from his glass. The audience stayed quiet, in the thrall of Colonel Rippendorf's stirring oratory. He put the glass down and peered out at the crowd, setting the stage for a more heated rhetoric. The question I pose to you, dear friends, is straightforward. What can we do to stop this madness in its tracks? How can we, in the Bring Back Our Nation movement, rectify this dangerous state of affairs before it's too late? The clock is ticking, to be sure. Soon our national elections will be decided by foreign hordes settling on our shores and by politicians who deceive us time and again, who are bought and sold by powerful elites and corporations. They will decide our destiny and our way of life, and not by native citizens like us. What can we do then? The colonel's resonant voice filled the hall with a compelling message that spoke to the fears and pent-up anger of the hoi polloi. This man was going places, I thought. We will lose our nation democratically, he continued. The liberal courts will see to it. Your sons and daughters will wake up one day and find our country run by foreigners and despots. It's already here, my friends. The courts, the politicians, and the media, they're all in cahoots, guilty of handing your birthright away and turning our country into an abomination. Look around. Men turn themselves into women and are allowed to serve in our armed forces. Women destroy the lives nurtured in their wombs without giving it a thought. This is what's held as sacrosanct today. Tradition and religious beliefs are mocked, while a foreign devil has taken hold of the White House. The audience booed and hissed at the colonel's allusion to the president. He held his hand up and waited for the audience to settle down. Fellow patriots, Rippendorf began, what does it matter if we have a democracy? If this system is bent on destroying our way of life and our identity as a people and as a nation, why should we put up with it? Let us have a system that works for us and not for them. The crowd broke into a rousing ovation. The colonel motioned to an aide off stage, who stepped in to refill his glass with water. The audience looked ready to start an insurrection right then and there. The colonel drank some water and waited for them to quiet down. Tell me which party you voted for in the last election, he roared, and I'll tell you how you voted yourself out of a birthright. The audience stirred, cursing their party affiliations and calling politicians out by name. You suckers do it every time you pull the lever in an election. The crowd growled back. The politicians tell you what you want to hear, then capitulate to the interests that go against everything you believe in. They support international agencies and interests who want to put you out of existence. I'm talking about the European Union. The audience broke into boos and hisses. The colonel glared out with a steely resolve. The International Monetary Fund and our own Federal Reserve. Another round of boos and catcalls from the audience. And then there's the United Nations. The crowd roared back with contempt. And let's not forget that we would not be succumbing to this new world order if it wasn't for this president. That brought the house down. They jumped out of their seats and shouted at the top of their lungs, cursing to no end the current commander-in-chief. I joined in, making sure no one mistook me for a Democrat. The colonel waited for the room to fall silent and began his next spiel ominously. This president, who came to power through the New World Order, has tried to change the Christian character of our nation. He has pandered to the Islamic world, of whom he is truly a son, with hidden loyalties to their faith. And by God, I believe he's looking to bring that abomination of a religion in full force to our shores. The audience weighed in with shouts and curses, their mood bordering on rebellion. The colonel waved his hands to quiet them down. We started this organization 5 years ago and built our glorious compound here in the hills above Tucson. My fellow compatriots, let me say, we are ready to move forward. The crusade must begin today if we are to save what little is left of our national heritage. We will bring back the nation we'd known to love and cherish and fill our organization with people who love God and prevail over those who wish to usurp us. The colonel banged his fist against the podium and scanned the room. The audience sat on the edge of their seats. We fold our tents today and leave the wilderness, he said in a hushed tone. looking skyward in a spiritual pose. "We now head toward a land of milk and honey that awaits us." He lowered his gaze on the audience, and in a loud, shrill voice, Colonel Rippendorf bellowed, "We will take back our country and make it our land once again. A nation that was given to our ancestors and to no one else by God Almighty himself." The audience rose and gave him a standing ovation. The colonel waved back before stepping away from the podium. The crowd shouted and stomped their feet, and called for an encore. The colonel looked back and smiled, then exited the stage. He proved himself a bigger threat than I thought. The colonel could make a splash in the current zeitgeist, and start an insurrection across the nation. But he'd have to get out of his uniform. A suit and tie played better on the stage these days.